our next session, which I get to introduce you to the phenomenal Mark Dombkins. He is based in Wollongong in Australia, but he is over in America right now. Like, how crazy is this time zone loop element? And Mark is the founder of Forever Projects. And I'm so excited to have Mark here because he is speaking about the power of community-led growth for not-for-profits. And so if you've never heard of Forever Projects, it is a phenomenal not-for-profit that exists to end the Tanzania orphan crisis in Africa through income generation for women and their babies. And so basically, Forever Projects has been around for over a decade, and they basically partner with local operators to deliver a bespoke 12-month program that helps with income creation for women, nutrition for their babies and their families. It is such a cause that's close to my heart. They also just did a huge hike and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro over in Tanzania, which is phenomenal. And so Mark is joining us to speak about all things building community for not-for-profits, which is really exciting. And so definitely if you are in the chat and you run a not-for-profit, please post a yes, because we'd love to see who is here live on that front. And understanding as well that we are going to be learning about how to actually build a community around not-for-profits and understand how to grow through growth, all of the different strategies, and basically generate sustainable impact in new ways that are very sustainable. And so it's super exciting because we've got Mark here absolutely sharing all of his knowledge. But before we hand over to Mark, I would like to ask everyone just to think about the thing that they have learned most in Loop at the moment. So if you have learned about a different takeaway, perhaps a template, anything that you've actually taken away so far, we just want to have a quick reflection and understand if there's anything that you have already found super useful before we do some new learning and hand over to Mark. So we'll just take 30 seconds and we'll understand the biggest thing that you have learned, and then we'll hand over to Mark. I think for me, the biggest thing that I've learned has been really understanding how to think about community, not just as a growth driver, but really as something that builds a brand, it builds trust, and also value for everyone involved. So I can't wait to read all of your elements in the chat, but that's enough about reflection because we've got Mark here live at the moment, which is absolutely exciting. So Mark, please, how are you? What's been happening? You're ready to roll and talk about all things not-for-profits. Yes, how are you, Mark?
I'm great. I love the hat. I love the hat coming to you from LAX. So
yeah,
sorry. Yes, it's
amazing.
So good to be here. I'm just having a little issue with my share screen thing, so we can keep chatting until here we go. I've got it.
No stress at all. While Mark is about to share all of the secrets for not-for-profits, I can see that Elizabeth here is part of a not-for-profit called Tech to the Rescue, which is amazing. We've got Yana here, who's definitely helped many different people with not-for-profits. I know that actually Forever Projects has been something that we've partnered on at the Community Collective, and we run a series of events in Melbourne and all over Australia that generate a lot of donations for Forever Projects. So it's always been so cool bringing people across. And I definitely want to come on the next Tanzania trip, Mark, to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And I'm going to bring this hat. And we're going to get a photo at the top of that mountain because we just spoke with Ben about climbing mountains, and that's what we're going to have to do.
Totally. I'm up and running, Kaz, and you will be there 100%.
Fantastic. Well, Mark, take us away.
Thank you, Kaz. And yeah, I definitely want to see that orange hat at the top. It'll be incredible. Great to be
Fantastic.
Yeah, really great to be here. Community is at the very heart of what we do at Forever Projects, and should be at the very heart of all things. So I love what Kaz is up to. As Kaz shared very generously, Forever Projects. It's all about empowering women through income creation. And I've got 3 takeaways, really, I think, that'll be helpful for you as leaders of communities within the nonprofit space today. And the first is really the importance of understanding your story and its power to connect people to communities. So I'm going to start with my story. Back in 2010, my wife Anna and I moved our 2 young kids to Tanzania. I'm a maths teacher by trade. So we moved our children to a little town called Moshi on the southern slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro. And while teaching maths, and I was a psychologist, we'd always had this real belief that children that didn't have access to a family should have that access to a family. And so 6 months later, we started fostering 3 more beautiful kids, Shay, Charlie, and Jabari. had 4 kids with 1 year old and a 4-year-old. So it was happy, beautiful chaos. That was November 2010. And then throughout the next 3 years, we went through the Tanzanian adoption process. And today you can see we've moved home to Australia with a surprising 6 to max the bottom. And there's a whole world of, the story of our family's adoption journey to go into there. But really, the moment that really sparked Forever Projects was the day we left the organisation with our 3 kids, walking past 57 others that weren't going to a family. And I think all adoptive parents, and maybe there's some of you on the chat today, would know this feeling of like, what would need to have changed in our kids' biological mum's story so that abandonment and malnourishment could have been avoided in the first place. And that question was one that we asked our local partners who were in Tanzania, and that led them to talk about a 12-month program that I'll go into in a minute, and helped us understand what role we could play as people in Australia to build a community who, legends like Paz and so many in the Community Collective, who want to help women and connect with this mission and connect through us and through understanding our story. And so I think the first takeaway I want to make sure as community leaders you're really clear on is start with your own origin story, because people can understand the mission through understanding that initial story of your own. And you can be that personal bridge between your mission and your movement. So going from there, we then really needed to make sure we can understand how to articulate this mission to people a world away, literally. The Indian Ocean sits between Australia and Tanzania, and so we've done a lot of work in making sure we're very clear on how to articulate our theory of change and our mission. So each year in Tanzania, 12,000 kids can't be cared for by their families. Women like Shakuru was too sick to lactate, watched on helplessly as little Joseph was losing weight. And alternatives to nutrition are just completely unaffordable. So it would cost a woman like Shakuru her entire week's wage to just buy 1 tin of formula. So imagine if you're in a country like Australia and you went to Woolworths, your local supermarket, it costs $1,100 for 1 tin. It's completely unaffordable. So that puts women in an awful position where they've got to either watch on as the child's losing weight, so about that image not coming through, or give them up in the hope of a better future. And for a project, we strongly believe that poverty should never be a reason that a woman should have to give up her baby. And we know that there's lots of people in our community who have shared stories of they've had children and they weren't for whatever reason able to breastfeed and have access to alternatives to nutrition, and they just couldn't believe if that option wasn't available to them. And so that clear articulation of the mission helps them understand, even though it's a world away, but actually we're not that different. And they've won the birth lottery being born in a country like Australia where access to those kinds of nutritional sources for children are available, and they want to do their bit to make sure women a world away can have that. And so fortunately, our Tanzanian partners have a solution, which is a 12-month program that starts with nutrition for the baby, crisis support, weekly health and skills training, and then capital to set up a small business. So that within 12 months, the family's gone from in the poverty cycle, potentially being separated, to being independent. It's on $1,200 to fund the solution. I love Shakuru's story. She was the 11th woman to join the program that I shared earlier, slides ago. She's not only got a business that's thriving, she's generated enough money to pay for her little boy Joseph, who's now 9 years old and in primary school, but she finished building her home. And she's returned as a coach to other women in the program who live near her village and have a similar business as a seamstress that they're setting up. And so to see someone go from at the very bottom of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs in real desperation to self-actualization and finding purpose through giving back is just incredible. So I think the second takeaway I want to give as community leaders to nonprofits is make sure your community is super clear on the problem and solution. And I think a really lovely framework we've learned to tell that story is, what's the bad thing that's happening in the world? What's your thing, the intervention, the theory of change? And then what's the good thing? And make sure you start and end with story, because as we all know, when we tell that story, people can understand it. And I was just at an event with Paz a couple weeks ago in Sydney. She was talking about the origins of the Community Collective, and I loved hearing her talk about the problem she was solving for community builders in Melbourne during lockdown. And as she told her own story, everyone in the room could really understand. So whether you're a non-profit leader or a for-profit leader, that personal connection and then clarity of the problem that your community solves is really important. From there, though, once you're clear, how do you go from one person to many? And it's tempting to go to the mass audience straight away, but Seth Godin, who we're all huge fans of, talks about finding the smallest viable audience. And there's a quote I'll come back to at the end there where he talks about people like us do things like this. So we just gathered 60 friends and family initially around this mission, people who knew our story, wanted to get involved, trusted us, and just through storytelling invited them into the story. They then wanted to be generous, and then they knew every $1,200 they gave was a whole woman's journey completely transformed. And then through story, we could connect them to the impact that they had. And they naturally then told others. And you know that you're doing well and you know you're doing the right thing when your audience finds other people who align with and love your story as well. So we've got this beautiful community where we notice that as we contribute to the transformation of others, and quotes like this from Lydia are so powerful, where she's gone from isolation and anxiety about her future to feeling belonging and connection. They actually transformed in the process as well. And we love getting testimonials like this in from LC donors like Dana and Ashley, who talk about being pregnant at early stage in their family's journey and going, I can't imagine what it would be like to not be able to provide the basics for my baby. So we're actually solving a problem for them. They're globally minded, incredible humans who want to actually contribute to the world. And as they do so, they feel a little more hopeful and a little more connected globally, and they feel transformed themselves. And so that's the problem we can solve as non-profit leaders. And I think in the world at the moment, particularly, like hope is a scarce resource, and people feel that problems are so big. What can I do? And I think helping, certainly in this recent Tanzania trip, we were able to remind each person that every $1,200 they raised for their Kilimanjaro climb was another woman who they actually met in the program whose life was transformed. They could connect their community back to that. And so we don't need to, as non-profit leaders, bend into like nihilism where it's like, well, what can we do? The problem's too big. Or narcissism where it's like, oh yeah, we've got the solution, we'll solve the whole problem. But just have a humble contribution to the problem you're solving. We've got this saying, and I think Paz talks about this so much in the community collective around like making sure there's like rituals and sayings and mantras that your community knows. So it's like, as Seth says, people like us do things like this, and ours is what's in your hands. One of our early supporters was a builder from Wollongong in South Coast New South Wales, and he stood up in front of our community one day and said, I was trying to think, what can I do? I'm building homes for people. And he said, I looked down at my hands and I've got a hammer. He just asked himself, what's in my hands? And hammer. I can use what I've got to help other people. And so we've got a community of people who have, as we've not said on socials and through our community communications, like, hey, give money. We've said, what's in your hands? Is it time? Is it talent? Is it money? Is it your network? And give your way, give in a way that actually feels right for this season of life you're in. So we've got legends like Trait, the street artist there, who does beautiful murals to captivate people in our local community. Published a manifesto that was really just a book with all of the stories of the people in our community who are doing generous things, using what's in their hands. And as we shine a light in our community, people see that and they're like, oh, I want to get a bit of what they're having. And that's the power that we have as non-profit leaders to kind of shine a light on the people whose lives are transformed as they're being generous. And then that joy that they're having and giving is on offer to other people. And you can show that you're a non-profit that can help actually solve not just a problem a world away, like in Tanzania, but a problem locally for people here who want to actually do good. On the back of these incredible people have had tons of impact, and we've seen the program that was initially started in larger scale, 6 cities, and now there's nearly 2,000 babies and more than 2,000 women whose lives would have been separated because of poverty, but now aren't. And we've nearly raised, just past $2 million to raise for the community. It's just been through that commitment to telling stories, shining a light on people using what's in their hands, and like fanning a flyer on the community and just giving them the tools to kind of go out and do what they want to do and listening to what they do. So it's an incredible milestone to the past, but it really is just put one foot after the other. Stephen says, like in small spine boarding, it's like find your first 10. And if those 10 go and find another 10, you're onto something. If those 10 don't come back, So that's the third thing I just would say is like really think about that saying from Seth. People like us do things like this. That's his 7-word definition of culture. So you just need to ask, who are the people like us in your community? And what other things like this? What is it you're calling them to do? And there must be a benefit to them and your mission. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. Those are the 3 takeaways. Number 1, start with your story because you can be that personal bridge between the mission and the movement. Number 2, make sure you have real clarity on the problem solution that your nonprofit's solving, doing your thing, good thing. Third is think about the culture you want to build and how you can use story to do that. I think when we do that and when people, we certainly felt this for the people who just came back from Tanzania and told the stories about climbing Kilimanjaro, being in close proximity to poverty for the first time in their lives for some of them, and feeling that sense of hopelessness, but then that sense of contribution. The problems are going away tomorrow. It's a little worse because me and my community stepped in. So there are 3 things I'd love you to take away. Q&A.
Wow, Mark, that was absolutely phenomenal. And just the story, I just love how you share the origin story, right? And just so many beautiful quotes. I think one that always sticks in my mind is people like us do things like this, from the beautiful Seth Godin, but just how you've also kind of taken that motto and then made it your own by saying like, what's in your hands. And I love that it's meeting people where they're at for the season in life that they're in. It's not just, hey, we're a charity, like give money, finances are the only thing. It's like, cool, what can you do? What ideas do you have? And I know you have so many incredible advisors that help run events and write content and just spread the word in different ways. So that is lovely. We are now entering our Q&A section. So how this is going to work, what we're going to do is we would love to hear any questions that we have from the audience. And basically what we're going to do is jump into the Q&A box, and you can post any question that you have for Mark, as we have 10 minutes to dive into all of this. Mark, we have a question here from Vicky already, which says, what's one experiment that you could recommend for a community just starting to test its impact?
I guess if the impact on this for us, like when we think about impact, there's the impact in Tanzania and impact here. So maybe I'll talk about both, but I'm not quite sure which one. But one thing that you've helped us hugely with, Kaz, has been thinking about how do we build community away from that initial small viable audience, which for me was the south coast of New South Wales, Wollongong, and how do we kind of build up there? And so for us, impact was community coming to an event and leaving feeling joy, feeling connection to new people who are aligned with them, and feeling some kind of new insight that they hadn't had before. And we knew that it wasn't going to be, hey, we're going to do an event at Canvas Space talking about the Tanzanian orphan crisis, because people shouldn't feel bad about the fact that they're busy, and they probably don't want to come to an event because that's not looked at. So, as you were part of our first event in October last year, we ran an event called Collective Effervescence. And there was that idea of how do you build a community where we kind of come together with almost strangers and move together for something bigger than ourselves. And we had yourself, we had Shay from the Melbourne Mavericks, we had Steph and Laura from KIT, and that's a really important theme to our community at Forever Projects. We weren't talking about the orphan crisis there. We were talking about actually being part of something bigger than ourselves, like Forever Projects, is a real human need and want, and we can solve that problem. So I think that's one thing I would think about experimenting with impact on this side, is just thinking about, don't expect people to make you where you're at, rather meet them where they're at. Apologies for the announcements going over the background.
No.
That's a really important thing to do. So empathy is, people aren't selfish or stingy. People are busy. They've got a cost of living crisis. They're trying to make a buck. They're trying to look after their kids, get the kids to school. They're trying to look after aging parents. There's all these things happening. So practical empathy says, how do I meet you where you're at and actually add value to your life? And so that's how I thought about that. On the impact side in Tanzania, just briefly, I think rather than talking about a specific, I would just say best practice in philanthropy is trust-based philanthropy, where the teams that we're partnering with are very clear on what their theory of change is and what money is going towards. And so we then just say, okay, as long as you're spending it within that remit, you don't need to tell us, like they do tell us in reporting, but they don't have to justify why they spent more on business setup this month than nutrition. They've got this. So I think the experiment is, how much can you trust partners, and the more trust that you give them, the more innovation they can have. So I think more broadly speaking, that would be one piece of advice on that side.
Yeah, and it really gets me thinking, especially when you mentioned practical empathy. It's actually saying, hey, we understand that life is tough right now. We're in the age of AI and things are coming out. There's scams, there's information overload. People can contact me on WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, email. I have 5 email addresses and I run 2 companies. Oh my God, so it's like this element of people do care, and they're not lazy and they're not being stingy, but it's how do we get through and cut through the noise, especially when it's a cause that is so important. We've got a really good question here from George Mark that says, George, do you have any impact metrics that you measure? And if so, can you tell us all the secrets?
Yeah, great. Love that, George. Yes, it's really important to measure outcomes, not outputs. So the local partners are providing formula milk for women who can't lactate. And if their breast milk returns, that's great. But so rather than measuring how much formula milk's been given, it's what weight gain do we see in babies within 3 months, 6 months? And how does that compare to World Health Organization standards? Or what's the middle arm circumference of a child when they enter the program? What is it after 3 months and 6 months? And so these are the kind of things that are measured. I think on the business side would be, what's the income when the women start the 12-month program? And then what's the income at the end, and then what's the average increase. And so, yeah, and I think it's important also to think about like, I'm a maths teacher by trade. This is not a capability that I bring to Forever Projects. I bring a personal story. I'm a community builder. I'm a good culture shaper, but that's not it. So who does that really well? And we partner with an organisation called Global Development Group, and that's their jam. And so we send money to Tanzania through that organisation. They audit and report, and they look at and say, oh, how are you currently doing impact measurement, and then what's the way that you can do that? So I think on that, I'll just also say for any builders, like, we're running on lean resources, right? So work out what is your superpower, what's your thing that you can do and do best, and then how do you outsource the other superpowers to other people.
One tactic I love to do that is building my own personal advisory board. I remember before I quit my job to then go full-time as a founder into the Community Collective 3 years ago, I sat down and said, what's my superpower? Well, it's definitely not building a business because I've never done that before. And so I sat down and wrote the 5 gaps that I had. It was like finances, like accounting, and then like building a profitable business so it becomes sustainable, and then like building programs and like learning design. And I sat down and I was like, okay, these are not my superpowers. Who are those people? And then wrote down basically like the dream skills and knowledge and experience that I would look for, that I'd want to learn from. And then sat down, wrote out those like 5 seats, and then just went out and into the world. And I said, do you know anyone who's like really good in finance? Like, oh, great. Oh, you should meet Melly Arena from Blackbird Ventures. Oh, she became our co-founder. And then, I've built this personal advisory board where I catch up with them every fortnight, every month, quarterly. And that's been over 3 years. So anyone here tuning in, grab a piece of paper. I've got my beautiful Gainsight notebook here that I'm writing, one of the sponsors for today, and write down what are the superpowers that you have and follow Mark's advice, and also understand how can you outsource that and find other people who are, because that's going to be really important. So Mark, oh my God, I'm loving this. We've got one more question here, which is, what has currently been the trickiest part of this work for you personally?
Spicy. Yeah, I would say it's probably 2 things I'll touch on real briefly. Number one is, as a founder, whether it's a non-profit or a for-profit, as you can tell, like, my family's personal story is tied up in projects, and so it's very hard to separate your own sense of identity from the identity and kind of separate living organism of forever projects. But it's really important as founders and as leaders of non-profits that we can do that, because it's such, these are big problems we can solve in a lifetime. And so how do you okay, this is what's mine and mine to do, and I can like switch off at the end of the day and go home to my kids, be a good friend, be a good son to my day, and like make sure that you don't get too entangled there, because otherwise it's not a sustainable way to do it. I think the other kind of tricky part personally is just knowing what's the unique value that I as Mark can bring to for projects in this particular season that we're in, and how do I have the guts to let other balls drop or pass them on to someone else who can do them better. And so for us at the moment, we're at this exciting time where we're starting to see some real inbound demand and like curiosity from the tech ecosystem within Australia. We need a few more hires to be able to capture that demand, and I need to, I'm still teaching maths part-time. I need to go full-time so I can really focus on this. So it's coming back from this Tanzania trip, it's like all focus must be on getting the capital, unlocking some capital in terms of to grow our capacity, to fund our OPEX in Australia, to unlock that time to grow the headcount so we can actually accelerate the impact. And so there's a lot of things that I see on my radar of like, I could do that, but it's not in the unlocking capital bucket. So I'm like trying to say no to almost everything. As a people pleaser and someone who just, I'm at a restaurant and there's a menu of 5 things, like I'm about to go up to Chick-fil-A up at LAX, and like it's gonna be hard to choose one thing. That's hard with my personality type to just go just unlock capital. So they're the kind of main things I'm wrestling with at the moment, and I would strongly advise any leader, whether it's non-profit, do executive coaching where you can be aware of what those saboteurs are. Naturally, you're naturally going to get in the way of your leadership. It's really great to have that self-awareness, because then you can see them coming. I see you people pleaser. I see you less kind of want to do everything. You've served me to here, but we've got this. Thanks.
Yeah, it's about saying no, right? But in order to say no, you have to do what you've just explained, which is identify the priority. And so if it's not income generation for the cause that you care about, then what is the priority? And obviously, in my life, my number one priority, do you know what it is, Mark? My number one priority. Can anyone guess? Oh, my number one priority in my life is me and is my energy levels. And I have to put that first, because if I'm depleted and I'm exhausted and I'm overcommitted and you people please and you said yes to too many things, then I can't serve anyone.
Yeah.
And if we run ourselves to the ground and put others first, of course, like our priority is our family and our friends and our business and our community and our members and the impact. But if we give ourselves away so much and over-index and burn out, like, is anyone winning in that situation? And a lot of people, oh, that's selfish. Oh, like, that's ridiculous. But that is the mindset that we need to cultivate if we're going for sustainability, right?
100%. Yeah, love that. It's a great reminder. Yeah, and it's like the best thing you can do to serve the people you care about is make sure you're in a position to serve. I was just saying to my wife the other day, it's like when we've got a house full of teenagers, and just asking myself, like, what do I need to do in architecting my life system so that I'm in the best position to enjoy them and be present when they come home with some thing or whatever. And it's like just architecting your life system where life priority before business. 100%.
Yeah.
Great reminder.
Architecting the life system. We spoke about not-for-profits, building community. Now we're ending on architecting your life system. Thank you, Mark, so much for joining. I really appreciate it. There have been so many cool realizations. And also, I mean, at the end of the day, you also have 6 kids and you've raised $2 million for forever projects in this incredible not-for-profit. So exactly, all of you have. And I'm just so grateful. So Mark, any final words before we wrap up and head to our next section? What are you going to leave us with?
I'm just going to leave you with what you said. Just think about putting your oxygen. I see it in the chat. I'm about to get on another plane. Put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on someone else.
Oh my God. Well, hopefully you don't have to use that oxygen mask on the plane. But thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it.